Welcome to the 3D camera tracking here in After Effects Cs6. We're going to be going over a shot from the Temple Run video on Final Cut King's YouTube channel page. We are going to be showing how we did the shot here, where we used 3D motion tracking along with Cinema 4D to create this lava pit. And so we're going to take our shot here and bring it straight into After Effects, dragging it into a new composition here. We can see that we've got Zach running, and it's really not a fire pit, but just a simple little ditch, not even very deep. No fire at all, and we're going to use After Effects' 3D motion tracking to solve this scene. So we have our clip here selected, and we're going to go to Animation, Track Camera. And now we can see it's already starting to analyze. Again, this is going on in the background, so we can work on other stuff while this analyzes. But what it's doing right now is finding features within After Effects that we can use to track and solve for a 3D camera. So once this process is completed, we can see here we have several tracking markers in the scene which are sticking to different points. Some of these trackers are accurate, some of them are what we call false positives, and they aren't necessarily useful for a camera solve. And we can get rid of those, or we can choose to just leave them in some situations. But here we can see some trackers that are sticking to the monkeys in the background and certain areas in the foreground that we know to be false. So we can click on them and just hit the delete button, and it's going to get rid of those. And we can see it's going to reanalyze our camera. Now with a few of the erroneous tracking points deleted, we can move forward here. Looking here into our advanced features, we've got some more options that can be useful in certain situations. We've got auto detect, which it's defaulted to. We've got our typical, which means that we've got typical camera movement. We've got mostly flat scene, means we've got little parallax. So if we had a scene where we were shooting against a background that was far away, or perhaps the sky, where we've got a little amount of shifting between objects in the fore, mid, and background, we want to use the mostly flat scene option. We've got tripod pan, where almost no parallax and our camera is placed on a tripod. So these are all different features that are going to help our solve and make it more accurate. So we can see here we've got average error, which if this number is generally speaking at 1 or below, then that's pretty good, but it's going to tell us with the data that it has how accurate After Effects expects that our track will be. So here we have 0.38 pixels, so that's a pretty solid track. We've got detailed analysis, which is just going to up the number of points that it tries to track. So this is going to take a lot longer, but it's also going to potentially make our track a lot more accurate. Sometimes the approach I take is less is more, and having fewer tracking data not only makes it a lot less time consuming, but can also save us time in having to remove the false positives. And then we have our hide warning banner, which will just give us a warning when we are in trouble of not getting an accurate solve. So those are the advanced features here in the 3D camera tracker. Also looking up here at the shot type, we have a fixed angle of view or a variable zoom. A fixed angle of view means that the focal length of our camera stays consistent. So if you're shooting on a DSLR, you have either a prime lens or a zoom lens. If you have a prime lens, you never have to worry about changing this to variable zoom. If you have a camcorder, a lot of those also come with zoom. And so if you are zooming in and out in your shot, then you want to turn on variable zoom, because although it's more difficult to solve for a camera with variable zoom, choosing this feature will help After Effects to do that more accurately. Looking over the frame now, what I want to run over here is how I used this 3D track to make an awesome rotoscope in a matter of minutes. We can see here we have these rocks in the foreground, and I was able to use a rotoscoped map here in After Effects to create a really easy rotoscope. So I have these points selected here. These are all points that I see as being relevant, and I'm going to right click with all of them selected and click on Create Solid and Camera. So now what it's done, it's created a new camera here in After Effects. It's a virtual camera. If I go to my 2 view, we can look at the top and see that it has created a new camera. And scrubbing through this, we can see the camera moving and being keyframed along every single frame. It's going to go back to our 1 view here. And if we click on our solid layer here, we can see that it's tracked into the shot. And we're going to go ahead and reposition it, hit the W to rotate it. And now we can size this up so that it takes the place of all of our rocks. We can even move this down. Again, there's been a camera solve, so we can move this solid around, and it's going to stick to our scene just in a different part of the scene. So now what we can do here is unview this top pink layer, and we're going to move in here and create a rotoscope, but we still have our layer selected. So let's quickly go ahead and rotoscope through this. What we're doing is drawing a mask right around the rocks in the foreground. So with this mask finished off, we can go ahead and turn its view back on, and we can see that it's in the shape of the rocks in the foreground. And now we can select our layer and hit MM twice and change our mask feather up. Now we can select our layer here, and we're going to hit Command D to duplicate that layer, and now we're going to set its track matte to the alpha of the solid right above it. And what we have now is a rotoscoped out. We're going to solo this layer, and if we move through the scene, we can see that our foreground rocks have been rotoscoped out with absolutely no keyframes and a matter of minutes. So really awesome. Making a quick glow layer here, we can see that it fits behind our rotoscoped rocks and gives the illusion that it's being placed there in 3D. We can delete this glow layer and select all of these layers here and hit Command-Shift-C to pre-compose them into their own matte. So now we can rename this. And that's a single layer now that contains our rotoscoped out foreground rocks. And we used the 3D motion tracking here in After Effects to solve for that. Now what we can do is we're going to create another camera solve for this back plane here where the fire pit is supposed to go. And we can select these points here that we know to be accurate because we can see them. They're sticking onto our scene. And they're all... And it's safe enough to say that they're all pretty much on the same scene. Now we can click on our middle target here and drag it around and get a feel for what our plane looks like. And that looks pretty good. We can even change the target size. And we can drag that around. And it looks really good. So now what we can do is right click on one of our points. And we're going to create a shadow catcher and camera and a new light. And now we can take a look here at our light. We can go into our viewer here and see that we have also this 3D solid plane, which is our shadow catcher. And now we can go into our 2 view. Looking up top, here's the light. We can move it around in 3D space, and it's going to affect how the light interacts with any objects that we place into this 3D scene. Now for the original shot, I used fire to add into this, but here I'm going to use this simple alpha pre-keyed tree layer so that we can see shadows, because fire doesn't produce any shadows. So we go back to our full view here. We're going to take this layer and make it 3D. And now what we can do is take our shadow layer here and hit P for position, and we're going to copy the position data from that layer to our tree data. And we can see that it's been added here, and it's a little bit small. But we can hit S here and change the scale, bring it up quite a bit. And let's not quite that big. And now we can move it around in our scene. Again, we have a 3D camera solve, so we can move it almost anywhere into our scene, and it's going to look as though it's sticking on there in the scene. And let's go and click on our left view here and take a look at how our tree is interacting with our shadow catcher layer. We can see that they're intersecting right now. So we can take our tree and bring it up a little bit just so the bottom of it barely taps the bottom of our shadow layer. And now going back to our active camera view, we have this tree in the scene, and we have a light as well as a camera. What we can do now is take our light, and we're going to change the light options here a little bit. Let's take our light, shadow, darkness, and we're going to bring it down a little bit, as well as change the diffusion to diffuse out our shadow. And now we go into our material options for our tree, and we're going to make it cast shadows. So we can see immediately that we have a shadow that has been casted onto the background. It's not super visible because we know that our light is coming from the front, and so most of the shadow is being hidden by the tree. What we can do here is take our shadow catching layer and extend it so that the shadow on our tree will reach the entirety of that layer. And now we can take our light and change the position of our light so that our shadow is casted in a way that's more accurately represented in our scene. So we can drag this around and move it up and down and just kind of get a feel for what would look best within this particular scene. Here we're dealing with some pretty harsh sunlight, so our shadows are pretty drastic, but if you were dealing with footage that wasn't shot in the sun, then you would want to make sure that you adjust your shadows accordingly. And that looks pretty good. We can move our tree around a little bit so that it's not floating off the ground. Earlier we had lined it up with the bottom, but because our originally imported tree layer didn't have the stump completely at the bottom of the layer, we can see that it needs to be pushed down just a tad. And because this is a 3D camera solve, we can move this tree around in Z space, and it's going to be accurately placed in our scene in a different Z position because it's not just a 2D track, it's a 3D track. So we can move it around and it's still going to look as though it's in the scene. Now we can render through this shot, and we can see that the tree is sticking wonderfully into the scene. We've got our shadows that are being casted onto the background plate. Wonderful. Now I'm going to quickly go over exporting to Cinema 4D. So for this shot, what we can do is we actually want to export here into Cinema 4D, but if we don't have that option, it's because we haven't installed our plugin yet. So we can go online, and here in Google, you can just type in Cinema 4D. It's going to take us to maxon.net, where we can install this plugin. We're going to click on this downloads folder here. We're going to go to our updates, and we're going to click on our plugins. Here we have some plugins for Cinema 4D. These will also work for CS6, although at this moment they only say up to CS 5.5. And we just download those, and we can place them here in our After Effects CS6 plugins folder. If you have Windows, this might look a little bit different, but again, this is just our plugins folder for After Effects CS6. Now, once that's installed, we can go export, send it to Cinema 4D, and save this, and it's going to save it as a .c4d file, so completely compatible in Cinema 4D. And now if we open up Cinema 4D, this is R13, we can then open up a new project file here, and we've saved it as test. So we open it up here, and here we have our file importer. We've got camera data, we've even got our tree layer, which has already been keyed out, and we can see that the scene's a little bit messed up. We have our ground plane above, and we can easily fix that, as well as our scale, because it looks like things are looking a little bit small. So we click here on our null object, and if we go to our multiple view, we can look at the side here and move it up. This null object is going to affect all of our data. We can drag it up. We can see now that our tree is above the grid line, and we can move that around until it matches just how we want it to. Also, even the scale, because we can see that our scale's a little off, we can go here into our coordinates and change this. We're going to just add a decimal here so that it's going to be changed to 1/10 of the size. And that looks pretty good. We can move this down again, get our tree to match up with the bottom plane, and now we have this scene. And if we play through this, you can see that our camera is doing exactly what it did in After Effects, and we have 3D motion tracked this shot in After Effects CS6, used it to improve our roto in CS6, used it to apply elements with shadows, and then now we've exported it here into Cinema 4D, where we could do camera projection or add all sorts of 3D elements into our shot.